Welcome back to the funniest podcast in New Hampshire, especially when we have guests like Chris P. Bacon.
That was fun. Yeah. That was fun. Crispy, thanks for calling in once again. You had us in stitches.
We had a good time. Welcome to GrokTALK.
And you can find his comments under some of our articles too, and he usually lightens up the whole tone of things, most illuminating.
Brought to you by Granite Grok, CNHT, available on, I gotta look at the list, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, and iTunes.
And YouTube.
And YouTube and Ustream. You can get some of these places you can go online and sign up there. Others you can download the apps to your smartphones and your devices, and then you will be able to listen to past programming. Our Democrat trackers can go find all the evil things that we've said over the past year.
And they can take us out of context, which we don't do to them.
Take us out of context, and when you do that, please link back to GraniteGrok.com so we can get the traffic. Thank you.
Yes, or at least let us have some fun at our own expense.
Yes,
exactly. And taking out of context is interesting. You know, we don't take the Democrats out of context, mostly because we don't have to. All of their stuff is laughable.
Well, which leads me to the point I was going to say when we were talking to Chris about comments and not, censoring people, basically just Xing out bad words or changing things so that it's not offensive to everybody, is that there's no incentive to remove liberal, progressive, Democrat comments because they are like a gift from the progressive gods.
Blog fodder.
Yes. They write what they feel, and then you can blog off that for like a month. It's amazing. It's like free. It's like a free gift. Here you go, manna from heaven or hell or wherever, whatever you want to say. And so why would we want to? I mean, we want to point to that and go, look at this idiot.
Yes, but speaking of
idiot, snow, more snow means it's global warming. Idiot. He's an idiot. People write dumb things.
Yes, or they say that we'll have no snow, like our federal government ambassador to New Hampshire, Gene Shaheen, said that we'd no longer have
and now
a ski industry.
We're going to have lots of snow. See, now This is interesting because I wrote this down. You saw the graph with the hurricanes and how we haven't had any Cat 3s for 3,500 months or something like that. So it's a record. And we talked to Joe DeLeo last week, and I've mentioned some things that Joe Bastardi has posted over at Weatherbell about how this year they're expecting a more active hurricane season than the previous year, but they're not really expecting any large storms, just more storms. Like Sandy wasn't even a hurricane when it hit, but it made a big mess. Probably won't have any Cat 3s. It's possible we're going to have a lot more hurricane activity because of other features on the globe, water temperature, things like that are normal, and those predictions are based on previous years when those circumstances were identical. So they can say, well, in these years we had these conditions and this is what happened, and that's pretty much how it works. So yesterday, Obama comes out and says, we have to stop climate change now because we're going to have more hurricanes this year. Yeah, but we're still not going to have more hurricanes like you guys said previously. It's crazy.
Yeah, but I am ordering more wood this week.
Because it'll be cold, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to order an extra quart of wood.
If you missed it last week, we were talking to Joe DeLeo, and he told us, he said, we're going to have a long, cold winter again. That's why he needs more wood. So go get some wood.
Possibly longer and colder than the one we just went through,
right.
which we got through more wood than we expected.
Which is not exceptional in any way, because it's happened before, and they can look at those same conditions and tell us that's what's going to happen.
We're nowhere close to a Maunder minimum yet. If that happens, we'll be looking at little ice age.
They were very accurate last winter. I mean, I've only started checking Weatherbell since the last 8 months or so, and looking at their predictions for the winter and what the results were pretty good. So I would say that they use the historical data very effectively with all the other factors, including solar cycles and things, to determine what the impacts will be on the weather at the surface of the planet where it really matters to us.
And that's really
isn't the count of storms also based on the on a long-term solar cycle, 70 or 80 years, if I seem to remember
like
right?
Yeah.
And this is the thing I was going to just say. They are just starting now to figure out all of these cycles and how they are starting to interrelate. And they're discovering, as they keep looking at cycles, looking for patterns, that they're finding that there are even more patterns. And my whole take on this is that we don't know enough to make these dire predictions. They say that the ocean level is rising up. Yeah, 0.43 millimeters per year. You think we could lay down a few concrete bricks that would take us into 10 or 15 years? You know how small a millimeter is.
I sure do.
Yeah. Now you take a concrete block. This probably would take us 50 years.
Let's do some math.
No,
you guys are engineers.
More than that. 0.43 millimeters a year means that it's going to take you nearly 60 years to get an inch.
Yeah.
Let's put that into perspective for the listeners. 0.43 millimeters a year of current rate of rise of the oceans, if that's even maintained, is between 50 and 60 years to get an inch.
Yeah.
Which means you can effectively do absolutely nothing, spend no money, and it'll make no difference.
The only thing they got to do is plug up the New York subways. Take that big balloon at the end of the tunnels and just put it in, inflate it, and make it airtight.
An inch?
Well, like with Sandy, where the water came up and kind of went in because of the wind and the whole bit.
An inch you can fix easily.
Over 60 years, though.
Yeah,
not an inch all at once.
No, you could improve walls, storm breaks, and so on, and ultimately you build in the floodgates or the inflatable balloons to prevent the water getting in when there is a storm surge.
I just like big balloons.
Yeah, well, that's fine.
If your union public employees paid 0.43% of their own retirement over the course of 60 years, you would have plenty of money to build all the balloons and dams and dikes and whatever you wanted. More than enough. 0.43.
Yes.
Today's GrokTALK is brought to you by
0.43.
Okay.
Yes, folks. All right. What else is new? Oh, academic triggers. The whole idea of social triggers. You know what a trigger is, other than the thing that's on your
It's
hip?
very similar to that thing.
Yes, it's supposed to be a warning. Don't go there, or bad things are happening to you. I look at today's.
The wonderful thing about triggers is triggers are a wonderful thing.
Yes, triggers in this context means what we're about to read may give you heartburn or paralysis or just scarediness kind of deal. It's sort of like the warnings in front of when I watch UFC. Warning, graphic violence. I've turned on to this channel specifically for this graphic violence. You don't have to warn me about this. But it seems to be all the rage, especially among the gender studies, feminist studies, whatever type of deal, that supposedly the strong feminist can't not take the subject matter without being warned. Oh, this may offend you. And it's not just the feminist studies or the gender studies.
Hey, I was offended by that warning.
Yeah. Basically, it seems like all of our college students are such precious little snowflakes. They can't take anything that will offend them.
Of which we will have more, thanks to global warming.
Yeah. So actually, there was a great cartoon this week, and I'll find it and post it to go along with this segment, that showed a commencement speech, and there's this big poster saying, "Trigger warning, what you're about to hear may be offensive." And the speaker said, "Life is hard."
Yes.
Everybody's got their ears covered.
Oh, no.
Suck it up, people. You youngsters coming out and your academicians. Life is hard. Life is brutal. Life owes you nothing. And that seems to be the moment of the day that you're also special. We owe you everything. And speaking of owing people something, the whole idea of reparations has popped up into the news in the blogosphere, where a black writer over at the Atlantic, Ta-Nehisi Coste, I think is the name. I'd have to look it up again. But basically trying to reinvigorate the whole idea that because of all of the injustices to the slaves way back when, that we should be paying current blacks.
She didn't get in on Pigford?
It was he.
He didn't get in on Pigford?
No, didn't mention that
Pigford
at all.
was reparations?
I look at this, and we can combine this with this white privilege. Check your privilege kind of deal. Okay, what privilege am I supposed to check? That my Swedish ancestors enslaved my Irish ancestors? That my Irish ancestors came to this country because the British were starving them during the potato famine? Do I check my privilege because when they arrived in South Boston, all they saw were signs saying Irish need not apply? How about the other ones? Well, there's a whole bunch in my
None
family
of them matters.
that I
You're not black.
Yeah, well, here's the deal. How about some of the blacks that moved here just maybe 30 years ago. Should they get paid just because of their skin color? I mean, this whole idea of reparations is just stupid.
It's BS. You know, the black and Middle Eastern communities in England all moved there voluntarily. Not merely voluntarily, they clamoured to move in when England made it a little harder for Commonwealth citizens to automatically take up residence in the UK. You can't shut us out. We want to escape our hellholes.
Yeah. Well, the deal is it violates, no matter how you want to look at this and how bad you think it was that there was slavery in America, and it certainly was, but it violates one of the biggest tenets that I guess the IRS is Social Security is supposed to bring back. The children are not responsible for the parents' misdeeds and guilt.
Absolutely. And the entire objective of the slaves from the beginning was the freedom to live their own lives, practice their own trades, and defend themselves. Indeed, the Second Amendment and the founding of the NRA was to help freed slaves defend themselves from white Democrats.
And they did. And they did. And we could probably spend a week of GrokTALKs talking about this topic.
But I've actually got some advice for those that are seeking reparations. Watch what's going on in Nigeria right now, where black Muslims are enslaving other blacks and selling them into slavery and into harems and whatever else. And you want some reparations? I got news for you. Go get it, buddy. Pick up your rifle, row your boat, go to Nigeria, go after the slave drivers, and demand reparations from Boko Haram. And I hope you come back.
Hey, you know who else should be demanding reparations? Arizona. Do you know why? He's nodding his head. All right, Mr. Steve, why should Arizona be seeking reparations?
I have no idea.
No, but you're saying yes.
Because of the immigrants that just got released there that were picked up in Texas and dumped in Arizona?
And New York and other places. It seems like the Obama administration's DHS, the Border Patrol, picks up these ICE, picking up illegal immigrants crossing over the border, and they're taking them and dumping them somewhere else. It's sort of like a few years ago.
It's like what New Hampshire used to do with its...
the bums.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's a one-way bus ticket. There we go. But here's the federal government.
Can we do that with Democrats and send them to Massachusetts?
No.
They only keep coming back like bad pennies.
I thought, I mean, you could come up with a list of things that the Obama administration has done to Arizona since 2008.
Yeah.
Like 2009. I mean, so they should get reparations for all of that. I mean, you could talk about championship basketball games. You could talk about, trying to pass laws in their own state to do what the federal government refuses to do. I mean, pick something. Arizona's been like their whipping boy.
Well, if I was Jan Brewer about now, I'd ask Sheriff Joe to set up a posse, round up these folks, and take them to the real border, and let's set them free in Mexico.
And here we come full circle of the Obama administration and the whole argument. It's one of those deals.
And by the way, we have a Marine in prison in Mexico because they couldn't figure out that all he wanted to do was make a turn, and they'd rather throw him in prison and make a case of it. Meanwhile, we have Mexican soldiers crossing the border with impunity and causing trouble and occasionally killing people. My answer to the whole thing is, let's just enable the Border Patrol to do their job, and let's jail a few Mexican soldiers that happen to end up in the wrong place by accident, as they claim, which of course is not by accident, and let's kill a few of them too, and send them home, just like the banditos do. Here's a lesson for your government. You play by our rules, or we'll send you the bodies.
I look at it as defending our border, and if I was president for the day, the first thing I'd say is 101st and 82nd, get on the border. Now erect those remotely controlled 50 caliber machine guns.
And by the way, we're going to drop in a battalion of Marines on that jail. Take our guy back and let their bad guys out and let them sort it out.
Something tells me that this discussion would keep us from having our own show on NHPR, Conservatives in a Strange Land.
Very strange. Very strange.
Well, the border is a strange land. If I found myself in that position, I'd actually turn around and drive the wrong way up the same side rather than cross the border. While calling 911 and saying, you guys have a bad road sign here. Give me a traffic ticket, but I'm coming back.
Well, remember when Sheriff Joe was up and we were talking to him? I mean, there's huge sections of Arizona where they say that citizens shouldn't go. Don't go here. Don't go here because it's dangerous. It's dangerous. It's dangerous because there's foreign intruders.
and because we're not allowed to protect the border and we're not allowed to run patrols through those areas, and Obama's just created another monument, a huge park right on the border of New Mexico, I think it is, where, again, the police say the rules are stringent enough that they won't be able to patrol it. In other words, it may be free to enjoy as wilderness, but it will be too damn dangerous to go there.
Yeah.
Well, BLM can go down there and exercise their sniper practicing type activities.
Oh, and kill a few protected turtles and exactly. Do a mass grave for cattle.
Drive to do a little four-wheeling, you know.
Well, here's something that I read earlier this week, and it comes from Bobby Jindal at a meeting of both Republican and Democrat governors with the president. And Bobby Jindal says, when we met with him as governors, I asked him, why don't you give the states more influence on accrediting higher education to bring more competition in the marketplace? And as you know, this is the first week in New Orleans where the last school district eliminated all traditional schools. They have nothing but charter schools. And educational rates are soaring, far better than what they've ever had. Here's the rest of that story. Here's the insulting thing Bobby Jindal related. In a room full of Democratic and Republican governors, basically, in so many words, he said, we can't trust states, we can't trust governors to protect their own people. Isn't that the perfect summation of the progressive mantra that you have to move power from the lowest level to the highest level, and the highest level says we can't trust anybody but ourselves?
And they can't do it because, according as Hayek wrote in the 50s, essentially, if you make government big enough and you concentrate all power in the center can never know enough to do the job right.
We're going to take 60 seconds. We'll be right back.
He tried to make us believe he was a fiscal conservative, but State Senator Jeb Bradley has been deceiving New Hampshire taxpayers. Like a wolf in sheep's clothing, he claimed to be one of us, pretending to blend in, but all along voting like a liberal Democrat. And oh, how he drooled at the opportunity to vote to expand Obamacare, which will result in higher taxes and longer wait times in the emergency room. And now, Senator Bradley is leading the charge to try and pass a Senate bill to prevent us from criticizing his vote. Call Senator Bradley at 603-569-4208 and tell him that we're on to his wolf in sheep's clothing routine. Tell him to stop pretending to be a fiscal conservative and start voting like one. Paid for by Citizens for a Strong New Hampshire.
GrokTALK. Yeah, baby!
He's obsessed with them.
No, I think it's awesome. I think it's really cool.
So let's a little candidate corner here. So last week I went along to a Walt Havenstein meeting, or should I have said a BAE meeting for Walt Havenstein because it was near their headquarters, and he gave a pretty decent speech, and he didn't mind me recording it, and it's on Granite Grok. And I met his press secretary and a bunch of his supporters, and his press secretary said, we'll talk to anybody, and he promised to bring the man on here, and I've exchanged a couple of emails and a couple of texts with Henry, the press secretary, but it seems to be awfully hard to actually pin down Mr. Havenstein, and I'm a little disappointed. We will keep trying to get him on here because he has a very decent business reputation. We want to find out if he's the kind of principled conservative that if he should win the nomination, is he the man we should be supporting? Meanwhile, we continue to support Andrew Hemingway because we know about Andrew. We know his principled positions, and he's out there working the streets, meeting the people, and we can get him on here anytime. So right now, we'd like to meet both the candidates, but one of them's a little harder to get at than the others. And also a gentle nudge to Henry. We really would like to find out about Walt Havenstein's principled positions. I believe he has them. I'd like to hear them.
Sounds like a grok shot to me.
Could be. You never know. You never know.
And then there's the Senate race.
Whatever piques my interest while I'm trolling through our program.
Yeah. And then there's the Senate race. So there's two candidates that are all over New Hampshire, like blot on the landscape. That'll be Scott Brown and Jim Rubens. Bob Smith's out there somewhere. We don't see quite as much of him. And Karen Testerman is undoubtedly the most conservative, but I think she's losing altitude a little. So, guys, what do you think? What are you hearing? What are you seeing?
Well, I know that there has been some chatter on Facebook where people are beginning to talk about the kinds of bills that, like, Senator Smith has sponsored to pass, and the kinds of bills that State Senator Rubens pushed when he was in the New Hampshire State Senate. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't call them the long knives. I guess I'd call them the short knives. But people are beginning to go out and say, well, this candidate is this and this candidate is that. And, of course, everybody's been beaten on Brown because I don't think we really hang out with the kind of folks who are like, oh yeah, Brown, he's great. We don't, most of the people we know, maybe with a few exceptions of people who aren't probably talking to us right now, is that Brown can't be allowed to win. So I think some of these folks are coming out and they're trying to scratch out a little territory where they maybe can push a couple people towards one candidate or the other, so that we don't end up getting Brown by default because everybody else splits the vote.
Right, and that's the big worry, that we get 40-30-30 or something like that, and Brown wins, and that would be terrible, because I do think 60% of the Republicans in this state are conservatives verging on libertarian. The question is, can we nudge them towards one? Is there any real preference for one over the other? They're certainly different, and is this the time to say, let's take the most conservative that can be elected before we get one that's definitely not conservative?
Well, I think it is going to put everybody into a quandary, because once again, if you look at the conservative wing of the party, it is a replay of what we saw with Charlie Bass, Bob Guida, and Jennifer Horn, where a lot of folks thought that one of the latter two was far better than Charlie Bass. And we watched Charlie, and Charlie did exactly what we thought he would do, and didn't bother to abide by his promises. And we ended up with yet another progressive Republican, and I will say that, as his dad was the one who formed the Main Street Republicans, and he took over later while he was out of office. The only people who seem to be enthralled with Brown are the establishment. This week we saw the endorsement by Kelly Ayotte. Okay, so much for. I keep seeing in the media where Kelly Ayotte was a Tea Party candidate, and we here in New Hampshire go, yeah, not so much.
Hell no, she wasn't.
But you see that Governor Merrill and former Governor Benson have endorsed.
They're not Tea Party either.
Well, they preceded the Tea Party as well, and they played no role in it. They are the establishment, and so we see now that the establishment is coming out for Brown, and the only thing I could say is Brown seems to be wanting to buy the campaign. And I still look at Coos County Republican Committee and saying, good on them for refusing the money.
Yeah, and I wish more of the more parts of the state Republican Party would refuse the money. The state party should be raising money and recruiting candidates to run for state offices. If we had a House majority with, let's say it, Bill O'Brien as the Speaker, we could roll back some of the progressive tide. If we had an actual conservative Senate, we could avoid the worst of the legislation and actually maybe undo some. If we had a conservative executive council, it wouldn't matter who the governor was very much. And if we actually elected a Republican governor, my God, we could actually turn this state into a bastion of liberty.
There are a lot of groups who are recruiting candidates for the Senate and the House, not within the not within the state party structure. They are just out recruiting. I mean, there are people, and a lot of them are delegates. They're in the party. They're party guys. I mean, and there's some that probably aren't, but there's a lot of people looking for people to run in races. Spec Bowers keeps posting lists of like 47 seats that are pretty easy to win if we just put somebody up and then there's another list of like another 26 that we could win if we had a decent candidate. I mean, there's lists of towns out there and seats that are available, and the last thing we want to do is not have somebody running in every possible race, because there's a lot of seats we would just win because we have a candidate.
Right.
And it's kind of stupid to just give those up. But so there are people out there doing it, and of course the state party is too, but they've never really been all that, in my opinion anyway, all that gung-ho about the House races.
Well, that's why I say to people that in the upcoming election, you're going to have the chance to run as a NHGOP delegate or run to be the NHGOP delegate in your town. Most people never even bother to. Basically, all you need is 10 people to vote for you in your town. Pretty much that's about it, and you would get elected. You would then have the chance to elect the members that would actually represent your area in the NHGOP state committee. And you can do an awful lot of good that way. And more people are taking that up and starting to do that.
And this is how we take over the party, bit by bit, and we'll get waves of repulsion as they try to push back, but we'll get there.
Yeah. Now, question for both of you. The RLCNH, the Republican Liberty Caucus of New Hampshire, formally endorsed Jim Rubens for U.S. Senate this week. Any thoughts? Speaking of groups endorsing or trying to get people to run.
I missed that, and I'm in the RLCNH.
And I forwarded the text of Aaron Day's remarks because he actually went through his reasoning in some detail. I've come around to Jim Rubens. I originally called him the statist because he does have a couple of big government ideas, and he personally believes that man is contributing to global warming. However, he's a free marketeer and a constitutionalist. He believes in very much maintaining the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the 10th Amendment, and he believes the right solution for energy is to remove all subsidies and mandates and just let them have at it.
Yeah, but he was in favor of a carbon tax. And the problem I think that some people have, and I'd be one of those as well, is, okay, sort of like Scott Brown. He never voted on the assault weapon ban, but everybody's taken him at that word right after Sandy Hook and said, well, he's against our Second Amendment rights. I'm not thrilled with having a carbon tax because I'm not based on our earlier discussion, I'm not entirely convinced that man is the major effector of any kind of global warming now that we've gone 17 years and almost 18 years without really any statistical global warming at all.
I think you can say man's contributing to the carbon dioxide levels. The problem is that the models are faulty and carbon dioxide is not the leading cause of global warming or lack of it. There are many other factors.
Correct.
And a little bit of extra carbon dioxide is good for the plants. So essentially, we're barking up the wrong tree, almost literally, if we're after a carbon tax. And I think Jim's realized the futility of this. The other reason why I think he's a good candidate is he's pushing the Liberty Front and he's getting the students excited. This may be his ticket to beating Brown and ultimately Shaheen.
Those are good arguments. Okay, well, we have a guest next segment. Warner Todd Houston, Breitbart.com. Will be joining us by phone. Skip's going to call him up during the break, and we will have a different conversation with different people, but it'll still be GrokTALK. I'm Steve McDonald here with Skip Murphy and Mike Rogers, and we will be right back.
When asked whether she still supports Obamacare, Senator Jeanne Shaheen said,
"Yes, I do continue to support the law. We're beginning to see some positive results."
How can Senator Shaheen say we're seeing positive results when 22,000 of our neighbors have already lost their health insurance? What's worse, the Boston Globe reports the state's only health insurance provider radically reduced the number of hospitals in their network, forcing some people to drive over an hour for lab work, even when there's a hospital within a few miles of their home. When pressed about lack of access, Shaheen said,
"There are some hospitals that are not covered, unfortunately, and I certainly hope that's going to change."
Jeanne Shaheen promised us we could keep our doctors and our healthcare coverage. Now she hopes we can get to a local hospital? Call Senator Shaheen at 603-647-7500. Tell her we need more than hope. We need leadership. Paid for by Citizens for a Strong New Hampshire.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
GrokTALK is 2 hours of news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com. But don't limit yourself to GrokTALK. Check us out at GraniteGrok.com. Follow us on Facebook or Twitter by searching Granite Grok.
Grok TV.